Hello, hello. This is Alison Gross, and welcome to another episode of TMI Corner. I don't know what that bright light behind me in the window is. I guess that's the light from my computer screen. So, today's episode is the IUD Saga, which is I had an IUD put in December 2015, so that means I had it in a little over a year, and I just had it taken out about a week ago. Keep in mind that this isn't the case with everyone, but I've heard enough horror stories about IUDs that the stories should probably be told. So, as I mentioned in one of my previous videos, I had this period where my birth control just was like not working, and it was weird, and I was bleeding all the time, and I thought I was dying. And I've since found out that this was probably a combination of me taking St. John's wort and not knowing that causes bad reaction, and the fact that birth control can respond badly to temperature, which I also didn't know that. But anyway, so I went to Planned Parenthood, who didn't know any of this, and they were about to put me on the Nova ring, and oh God, if only I had just gone ahead and done that. And then I backed off because I saw this thing about St. John's wort on it, and the IUD was the other option, except that also interacted with the St. John's wort. But anyway, so I was freaking out, and I was like, I will do anything right now. I just need this to stop. That was the first time I really felt the strong labor contractions when that was going on. But I was really terrified to get an IUD because I grew up in the 1980s, and I came of age, late 80s, early 90s kind of thing. This was when the Dalkin Shield scandal was going on. The Dalkin Shield was a form of IUD that was popularized as a type of birth control during that time period, and it was this flat sort of disc thing that had these barbs sticking off of it. And so what you may or may not know, what I know very painfully now, is that when you put an IUD in, your uterus is like, crap, there's a thing in it. I'm going to try to expel it. So the problem is that when you have these downward pointing barbs on it, what can happen is that in the process of trying to expel, those barbs can get stuck in the wall of the uterus. And this is an example of birth control being devised by men. This was actually kind of the point with the Dalkin Shield, because there's a problem that your body can actually successfully expel an IUD, and if you don't know, though I have no idea how the fuck you would not know after my experience, then you can get pregnant. So it was designed so that these barbs would catch if it tried to expel it, or they didn't describe it quite that brutally. But anyway, so a lot of these women got these things embedded in the walls of their uterus, got infections, and a lot of them were rendered sterile or had other permanent problems, and there was a giant class action lawsuit about it. And for about 10 years, IUDs were really kind of hush-hush, and people didn't talk about them. And when they listed when you went somewhere and they're like, let's talk about your contraceptive options, IUDs would either not be on the list at all, or they would be way down at the bottom. And this was the thing when I was growing up, and girls would talk about, this is, what am I going to do for contraception, and we would go through things, and it would be not the IUD. It was this thing that you didn't talk about, or if you did talk about it, it was don't touch that with a 10-foot pole sort of thing. So when they were like, oh yeah, we can give you an IUD, I was like, what the fuck? Are you offering to poison me or kill me or something? But I was really desperate, and they're like, no, these are the new IUDs. They don't have any of those problems. They probably don't have any of the problems the old ones do. I shudder to think what problems the old ones had then. So I agreed to this. So I was in so much pain. So I went in, and they had me take like 4 Advil before I went in. And I had no local anesthesia. Like, they did it 100% cold. I did this without any painkillers, which I'm personally happy about, because I later found out that the way that they would give you a local anesthesia is by injecting it into your cervix, and I have this problem with needles, especially near my cervix, so I would rather just deal with the pain. But anyway, so keep in mind that I had this put in with no anesthesia at all. And this is going to be truly a TMI episode. So, the first thing they do is they have to open your cervix and make it stay open. So first of all, opening the cervix fucking hurts. This is what labor is all about. Again, I've told you my menstrual pain comes from the fact that the body is trying to open the cervix, and that opening the cervix is that painful. And the cervix doesn't really stay open like when they put a speculum in you to do your pelvic exam or whatever. You know, you can't put an IUD in through a speculum for whatever reason or something. Or the speculum doesn't make it big enough. I don't know. So this is the other thing that you need to understand about me. I will get into this in another video when we talk about my back problems. Is that I have, like, my hip joints are really messed up. So I can't actually, like, bend my knees to my chest and keep my knees together. Like, I can't do a clean tuck. This is a big problem for me, like, in dance and aerial and stuff. And I train constantly to stretch my hip joints and stuff to be able to do this better. But what this means is I can't actually really, like, sit on the gynecologist examining table and put my feet in the stirrups, because my legs don't bend like that. So what I usually do for my pelvic exam is I actually, like, cross my legs and hold my knees to my chest on my back. Or I'm on my back and I hold my knees to my chest. And, like, my feet are tucked up out of the way, and then they can, like, they just go under my feet and go into my pelvis. You cannot insert an IUD that way because it makes the vaginal canal, like, bent. And it has to be 100% straight. And the problem is that the position that my legs have to be in for me to lie on my back on one of these tables and keep my vaginal canal straight, that alone is excruciatingly painful for me, because my hip joints are not constructed to be able to do that. So that's to begin with. So then they go in and they force open the cervix, which hurts a lot. And they put, like, basically the equivalent of a giant alligator clip on the cervix. And later, afterwards, she was like, oh, there's blood coming out, but it's just bleeding from the clamp. And I'm like, if it was bleeding coming out of my uterus, I would be okay with that, because I know there's stuff in there. I've just been having a period. If you say it's bleeding from the clamp, that means there was actually tissue damage that happened. That freaks me out. So anyway, you have this thing that's like a giant alligator clamp on your cervix, which your cervix is very sensitive. So that doesn't feel good. And then they have to measure you for the IUD to make sure they put the right size in you. Which means now that your cervix has been forced open and clamped so it stays open, they take a little ruler and they basically, like, stick it inside of you and keep sticking it in until it pokes you in the back of the uterus. And then they keep track of how far that was and take it back out, and then they know how big to make your IUD. Because apparently everybody's got a different sized uterus. And that really hurts. Like, that's actually the most painful part. Is having this ruler stuck into your uterus. And then they put the IUD in. It's actually very small. It's about, like, yay large or something. Little plastic thing. So what I had put in was the Marina, which is supposed to be a 5-year one. It has 5 years worth of progesterone in it, and it, like, releases the progesterone into your uterus. So they put that in, and having the IUD put in didn't even really, I guess, bother me because I was in so much pain from being in the weird position for my legs and having a cramp on my cervix and having a ruler stuck inside me, that I don't even think I noticed that at that point. But like, I was like screaming in pain when they measured me. And strangely, I don't know, it freaked the doctor out. She was like, this doctor at Planned Parenthood, and she was like, "Oh my God, you're almost done, come on, you can deal with it." Like, I could totally deal with it. I mean, I wasn't screaming because I couldn't deal with it. I was screaming because screaming was helping me process the pain. And then afterwards, she was like, "Oh my God, you did so well. You were so much better than normal. I insert hundreds of these a day or something." And I'm like, wait, I don't actually believe anything that you're saying, because if you insert hundreds of these a day and I did so much better than most people, why were you freaking out at my reaction? Very weird. So, yeah, the clamping and measuring and everything hurts a lot, but then they put the IUD in, and then they take the clamp off, and it's all okay. And there's a lot of blood, either because you open the cervix and the cervix is dumping, or because there was tissue damage from the clamp. I prefer to think it was the first one. Whatever, so you wear a pad and you go home. And you feel a little sore, and it's all okay. And then fast forward about 5 hours, and your uterus has discovered that it has something inside of it, and it goes into full-on labor, I need to expel this thing mode. And that was just, I thought I was dying. Like, I could not move. Correction, I thought I could not move. But I had Ariel that night. And I am insane about Ariel. And because you pay, and then if you miss class, that's just too bad. And it's like $35 a class. So I don't miss Ariel. Like, I have done Ariel with fever before. This was probably the most extreme. But it was like, I just had the surgical procedure without any anesthesia, and now my body thinks it's going into labor. I have Ariel. I'm going to go do Ariel anyway. So I went, and it was a rope night. So I spent the night climbing up the rope and hanging by my foot and fun stuff like that, when I had just had an IUD put in like 6 hours ago. I like telling that story because it is me saying that I'm a complete and total badass because I can do that. But anyway, so then that went on, and she was just like, "Oh, just take ibuprofen constantly, like as much as you need. It doesn't matter. Just keep taking it." So I did, and it calmed down after a while, and then it was like, "Oh, there's going to be several months where it's going to hurt a lot and blah, blah, blah while it adjusts, and then you'll stop having periods. And you can just forget about that for 5 years, and then you'll come in and we'll just take it out and put another one in, and it'll all be great." And I'm like, okay, I don't care that this hurts like a bitch, because then I'm going to stop having periods, and then I will never have to think about it again, except once every 5 years. So I menstruated more or less continuously from, like, through January. And I was taking, like, 12 ibuprofen a day. And this all kind of concerned me, but I was like, okay, this is the adjustment period. And then weird shit happened with my health, unrelated to that, and I just stopped caring about what my period was doing. I had bigger concerns. And it seemed to calm down a bit. Now, having a lot of stress and changing your diet can make you go off your period, and I did all of that. I lost a ton of weight, and so it might have been less. But I thought it was like, oh, my body's adjusting to the IUD. It's getting better. And then May hits, and I have a period for like 3 weeks. And it hurts a lot. I have some of those intense contractions. And this really concerned me, and then it kept happening. So I went back to Planned Parenthood, and they were kind of like, well, we can test you for pregnancy and for an STD, but we can't really help you beyond that. And I'm like, Well, I definitely am not pregnant, nor do I have any STDs because I'm in way too much pain to have sex, and the passage is gummed up all the time anyway. So yeah, that's not really happening. But you guys put this IUD in me, so could you help me out? And they're like, no, we can give you a pregnancy test and an STD test, and that's kind of it. And I'm like, well, fuck you. And they're like, you need to go have an ultrasound. And I'm like, what the hell? And I was all freaked out because I'm like afraid that they're gonna find out that I had like endometrial cancer or something. You know, I don't know. I was bleeding like 3 out of every 4 weeks and having intense pain. I'm like, oh god. You know, what if there's something seriously wrong with me? So I had a complete emotional breakdown. And then I went and had this ultrasound, and there was literally nothing. Oh, that was the other thing. I was also afraid that the IUD had migrated and was injuring me or something, which the ultrasound confirmed was not the case. Because the problem is that there's like these strings that hang down from the IUD that like hang out of the uterus, which seems kind of weird because I thought that was part of the problem. Apparently they use a non-porous kind of string now. Like when I was younger, and certainly like before my time, the IUDs, they would use strings that were like cotton or porous type of string, and so germs could migrate via the string up into the uterus, and you could get these really horrible uterine infections. So, which apparently now they use something that's where that can't happen, supposedly. I don't know. But you're supposed to like put your fingers inside of yourself and like feel your strings every month to make sure that the IUD is in the right place. I'm not able to do this because I don't know if my vaginal canal is abnormally long or my hands are abnormally short or it curves weird. I can't get my hand all the way back there. So I could never feel my string. So I'm like, hell if I know. I don't know what's going on in there. Which made me kind of edgy. So anyway, they did this ultrasound, which was horribly traumatic for me because I was convinced that they were going to find out that I was dying because I'm a hypochondriac like that and I freak out about stuff. But I mean, when you're bleeding constantly for like 5 months, it's, you know, it is easy to get worried. Yeah, the IUD was in a fine place. There's nothing there. There's no cysts, no polyps, no tumors, no blah, 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 blah. No fibroids even. One maybe little tiny fibroid. That's it. Like, there was nothing. Literally, nothing. So then I went to see, I found a real gynecologist and went to see the gynecologist. And I'm like, look, I don't have any of these problems. I'm just bleeding all the time and in pain. And she's like, oh yeah, that's normal. You have an IUD put in. And I'm like, it's been 6 months. I asked them and they said that was way too long and that you should have totally adjusted after 3 months. And she's like, that's total bullshit. Like, people can be having these reactions up to a year after the IUD is put in. I'm like, well, on the one hand, that kind of sucks because that means that I have like 6 more months of this to go, or could. On the other hand, everything's normal and there's still hope that it will fix itself. So, yeah. So I was like, okay. So I went through many more months of that where I was menstruating 2 to 3 weeks out of every month and having horrible intense contraction pains and stuff. And November came and it was where it had been a full year since I'd had the IUD put in, and it seemed like it was kind of getting better. So I'm like, okay, maybe it is gradually getting better. I'm just really, really slow with this. And then December comes, and I'm trying to go on my lovely cruise vacation. And literally the day that we're supposed to sail, or the day before, I am in Miami. I am trying to finish up my grades. And the floodgates just open. And it is so painful. And because it's Miami, we didn't have any hot water in the room because it's Miami. Why do they need hot water? So Fornius actually went downstairs and filled my hot water bottle from the like coffee making machine. Which, God bless him for doing that. But yeah. And then, so I'm having my period the entire time we're on the cruise. Oh, so not fun. And then it doesn't stop and it just keeps going. And then January comes and it just keeps going. And it gets to the point where it's literally been over a month. Like, it's like January 19th and it still hasn't stopped. And I'm just like, fuck you, seriously. And I'm like, oh God, but what do I do? I keep debating, should I have it taken out? And then I'm like, but what do I do instead? And I just don't know. And like when I talk to, my gynecologist, she was like, oh yeah, it's just that you're having trouble adjusting to the progesterone. Progesterone makes people spot all the time. And I'm like, this is not just spotting. Spotting doesn't make me have labor contractions. Like, spotting is just like a little bit of blood comes out. You don't have labor contractions when you're spotting. Also, because I was on progesterone for 10 years and I didn't have these problems. So I'm like, I really want to take it out, but I don't know what to do. So I make an appointment to see my gynecologist again, and I'm like just depressed and a mess because I was like, I don't know what to do. So by sheer coincidence, I have a conversation with a good friend, like my best friend who also has tons of menstrual issues, and like the birth mother of her children also has tons of menstrual issues, so she like knows about this all the time. And she's in the Nuva ring, and she talks about it. She told me about it and about how like painless and wonderful it is. And I said, look, I'm really scared because that does have some level of estrogen in it. Is it gonna make me gain weight? Is it gonna make my depression worse? And she's like, no, I've actually lost weight, and I certainly don't feel any more depressed on the Nuva ring than I did beforehand. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try anything at this point. So I go to my gynecologist and I tell her about how I've been bleeding for over a month and having this intense pain. Like this last time, so I went to my Chinese medicine person and told her that this was happening, and she gave me these pills that are like blood mover pills. And I don't know if it was because I was taking those or if something else happened, but the pain level just went up. Like, I had these periods where I was like, they would last for about 45 minutes or something, where I would be having contractions like 5 to 10 minutes, these waves where it would just get tighter and tighter, and I would like be curled in a fetal position, like screaming in pain, and Fornice would be like holding me. It was like, like you're in the hospital having labor, and then it would relax again. And then it would do it over again. And there were a couple of days where I had like a 45-minute slot of going in 5 to 10-minute waves of that. And she's like, wow, this is really worrisome. You might have an ovarian cyst. We should go like have you have an ultrasound to check. And I'm like, no, I already did this. I went through enough suffering with thinking that there was something wrong with that and having an ultrasound. I was already having these problems, and I already had an ultrasound in June, and there was nothing there. It's the goddamn IUD that's causing this. And she's like, yeah, progesterone has these problems. I have another IUD that has no hormones in it. And I'm like, fuck no. Like, I know that this problem is not the hormones in the IUD. The problem is that there's a thing in my uterus, and my uterus is trying to expel it, and that hurts. And, so putting something in there that has no hormones is ridiculous. And I'm like, no, that makes the pain even worse. And she's like, no, it doesn't, but I admit it wouldn't do anything for the pain you already have. And I'm like, whatever, I'm not doing it. So then I was talking to one of my friends at Ariel who has the Paragard, the non-hormonal IUD, and I'm like, yeah, she said it didn't make the pain worse at all, and she's like, that's not true. She's like, no, my pain, my menstrual pain is way worse with the Paragard in than without it. However, I had like no pain before, so way worse just means like I don't feel like going into work. Um, God damn it, you know, they're women who don't have the problems that I have. And she's like, what, so you want to take it out? And I'm like, yes. And so then she's like, let's put the non-hormonal in. I'm like, no. I'm like, she's like, are you sexually active? And goes on this like thing about that. I'm like, not right now, I'm not, because I'm in pain and bleeding 90% of the time. And she's like, oh, so it's interfering with your life. And I'm like, yes, it's interfering with my life all the time. And I was like, my friend says really highly recommends the Nuva ring. Do you think I could try that? And she's like, yeah. So then she took it out, which I had heard. And oh, by the way, I was running an extreme fever right then, because I got a really bad cold. So my pain tolerance was like nothing. So I was like, oh God, you know. But I had heard that having the IUD taken out is way better than having it taken in. And she's like, yeah, it's nothing. You just like cough and I pull it out. And yeah, it really was like, you know, she like put in a speculum and looked around, and I think she clamped something, I don't know, like in a way that was not painful like it was the first time. Or maybe I just didn't notice because I was so out of it. I don't know. And then I guess she took hold of the strings and she's like, okay, cough for me. I don't know why she has me cough. Like maybe it makes the uterus spasm. I don't know. So I cough and I feel her pull it out, and it did, I guess it hurt for the second that she was pulling it out, but it was so fast and I was so out of it that my brain didn't really process it. And then she's like, oh, it's out. And I mean, afterwards, I could feel like my uterus spasming, like for like a couple minutes afterwards. I could feel it like fluttering around or something. So it obviously like affected it, but like it wasn't, the spasming wasn't painful. I could just feel it moving. So having it taken out wasn't so bad. I haven't put the ring in because she said, oh, well, you have to leave it out like for a week and have a normal period before you start. Like you have to flush your system out from having IUD in. I don't know if that's how true that is or not, but whatever. I did it and it actually wasn't painful at all. Like I bled a lot, but it was 100% painless, which further reinforces to me the idea that a lot of the pain came from the body trying to expel the IUD, because yeah. So tomorrow or the next day, I'm gonna put my first ring in, and supposedly, like, she said it's fine if I leave it in. Like, they tell you to put it in for 3 weeks and then take it out for a week so you have a period, but like, who the fuck wants to do that? She said it's totally fine. Like, they have enough hormones in them that they last for 4 weeks. You can just leave it in for 4 weeks and then take it out and put a new one in, which is obviously what I'm going to do, because look at that, like, I've had enough periods to last for the rest of my life in this past year. But I do have to, like, I have to keep them refrigerated. The samples that she gave me are in the refrigerator now. And she said, oh yeah, it's fine if you need to travel, you can, you know, like, if you can take it on the plane and it won't, like, die in being on the plane for 8 hours or something. I'm a little nervous about that, but I'm really hoping that this will be much better for me. So my experience with the IUD was basically the most pain that I've ever had in my life came from that IUD. Like, the act of putting it in was the single most painful experience I've ever had. And then the amount of pain, like, basically I've spent this past year the equivalent of living with chronic pain, because I because it just hurt all the time. And then it like did fuck all. Like it didn't make my periods better. Was it effective as a contraception? Well, it made it so that I didn't want to have sex with anyone and nobody wanted to have sex with me. So in that sense, it was effective as a contraceptive, but whether or not it's effective beyond that, I don't know. So, am I saying don't get an IUD? I mean, I can't really recommend it. Like, all of the horror stories that I heard about IUDs growing up essentially were true. I mean, and I don't even know if it did permanent damage to me inside. I mean, I don't care because I'm not planning on having children, but supposedly IUDs can cause scarring in the uterine tissue, so it's harder to have children. I don't know. So that's been like the big thing that I have been dealing with for a year now, and I'm so glad it's gone. Like, I felt better as soon as it was gone, and even like me, like the fact that I've been having a period ever since then, or not ever since then, like it I mean, I was already having a period from being on the IUD like perpetually, but it was kind of winding down, and the fact that I started having a really heavy period again, I didn't even care because it like didn't hurt like it did on the IUD. So, are there people who have had positive IUD experiences? If you want to talk about it, get in the comments, go right ahead, whatever. But my instinct originally to never touch an IUD with a 10-foot pole was a good one, and I'm sorry that I deviated from it because I lost a year of my life in something that I can't get back. I just hope things are better from here on out. So yeah, that was my story with that. So yeah, I will let you know at some point how the ring works in a future video, if it works or whatever. So until then, everyone, bye!